So I've done one of these videos in the past, but this was back when I used only whole star ratings because that's what I could use on Goodreads. And now I use half stars on Storygraph and I round in whatever way I choose on Goodreads. And I thought I would revamp how I rate books, what I emphasize for myself when I rate books, so that when you do see my star ratings in my wrap-ups, you kind of understand what they mean, because I do think ratings are subjective. We don't all follow the same rules as reviewers. I mean, in general, 5's usually the best, 1's always the worst, but there's a spread. So I thought I would talk about what I care about when I rate books, how my subjective lens plays into that, and yeah, that it would be useful, fun, chatty time. It is going to, I think, be similar to the one I did a year and a half ago, but maybe a little different, because I feel like this is also something that's not stagnant. I don't rate the same from year to year, but it's also like a gradual shift. So like I'm a very different rater of books now than I was 5 years ago. And it's not even that my taste has changed a lot. It's just, I think once you read a large number of books and you keep reading a large number of books, you find more and more ways to differentiate them and put them in little pockets and really like define what makes a book a 5-star book or a 4 or a 4.5, etc. I'm still not at the point where I would ever use quarter stars. I don't know if I'll ever get there because I don't feel the need. Because part of ratings is, as a reviewer, if you know how I rate books, you have a sense of what it means for a book to be a 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, and how that relates to your scale. And that can be a useful tool, even in addition to my words. I hope people also listen to the words, because I think the words are more important than the star rating, because they tell you why, and if you're different from me, you can figure out tropes, character things, writing style, etc. But also for myself, just like as someone who likes patterns and compartmentalizing, I like to rate things by numbers so that I then have things in groups, and it's useful to me. And so I basically use whatever fractions make the system useful for me, and then just share that information with you guys because people like to see stars. I tried for one wrap-up video once to take away stars, and this was back when I was still a very small channel, and there was rebellion. Like, even back when my chat had like only a couple comments, people were like, "Can you write in the star ratings though?" And I'm like, fine. I'll just put them in. It's whatever. So, but as you can probably tell if you've watched my channel, is like, I think about it, but I'm not married to it, and it's not like this big sticking point. I do let it change. So ratings can change for a book with me over time, and if I remember, I will change it on Storygraph or Goodreads, but it's not like I feel that it's a big deal if suddenly I'm like, actually, that 4-star book is now a 3.5. Like, I don't feel the need to update those things all the time. It's not who I am, especially if it's only a half-star difference, because then probably I've already accounted for it on Goodreads. That's a rambly intro. Let's get into it. So things that I care about when I'm rating books or reading them and I'm like, where does this fall in my bucket? One of the primary things is consumability. How much do I want to be reading this book? How easy is it for me to consume this book? That doesn't mean it has to be easy to read. But if I am wanting to read it, if it's, a challenging book, but I'm wanting to pick it up, if I am engaged with the material for whatever reason, that could be world building, character work, premise, themes, whatever the reason, if I am engaged and want to be reading that book, that is a good sign. It really shoots a book high up on my rating scale, because the reason I read is primarily to want to be reading. I want a thing that makes me excited to sit down and do my favorite hobby. And so if it meets that first criteria of why I'm picking up a book, whether it is a nonfiction or a fiction and things like that, it's a pretty high one. And then another one, and this isn't the same thing as consumability, enjoyment. I have read several consumable reads this year that I'm like, I wonder what I'll rate it, because I really wanted to be reading you, but I didn't necessarily enjoy my time. So enjoyment is another part of this, meta algorithm that I don't have a spreadsheet for. I don't do that. This is all based off feel. These are just factors. So with enjoyment, it's pretty basic. Did I enjoy my time? And that's a big one. Like, something could objectively be poorly written or not well crafted. Maybe there are plot holes, maybe the world building is not super precise. But if I enjoyed my time and it was consumable, that's a 5-star book. That's the definition of a 5-star book for me. It really doesn't matter if it's a higher form of art or if it has perfect writing or anything like that. Especially if the goal of me picking up that book was to read for enjoyment and it met that quality and was consumable, it's a 5-star book. Now, there are other parts that maybe, because not every book is going to be completely enjoyable or completely consumable. There are other things that I think about. So part of this is the skill of the craft. Sometimes that does matter to me, especially if I'm thinking of the project of the work. So there's what I want from the work, like what I'm hoping to get from a book, my expectations going in, but then there's also the project of the author. And sometimes you can tell their intentionality, especially once you finish a work, and I will put that into my rating. Whether I wanted that project or not is separate from how I think about, well, did you accomplish this, whether I wanted to read that or not? And that's, again, kind of weighted in this whole category. Sometimes it can make a book have a half star or a whole star higher, even if I didn't enjoy the experience, because the project was unique enough or it was, I thought, really well executed, even though it's not my thing. Also, connection's a huge thing for me. And this kind of like leads into enjoyment and consumability. Like if there's connection, I will naturally have those other things. But connection to character, to plot, to themes, I don't have to relate. I think relatable works are great, but I can't relate to everything I read. Like I read a bunch of fantasy and sci-fi. I'm not relating to all of these people. But if I can connect to it, if I can, feel invested in the situation or intrigued by it, if there's that X factor there, that's going to be really important. And I guess that also just characters tend to be the vessel in which that works for me, because I love a good character. If I am ride or die for the characters in a book, it's one of those things that's like enjoyment and consumability, where it can be great enough for me to forget or not notice any other flaws that other reviewers might come up with. My ratings, if you can't tell by this point, it's not objective. It's based off my experience, and I think that's because I'm consuming and reviewing art, and a large part of consuming art is individual and a subjective experience. I think sometimes I do read a book and I'm like, that was just bad writing, and there was no other redeeming part of the book to help me out, and that's what I say in my review, is like, it's getting this because I didn't think it was well written. Luckily, that doesn't happen very often. I feel like on average most books meet the bare minimum requirement of, meeting grammar expectations and being well written. There are usually maybe stylistic things that don't always work between each reader, but again, even those are subjective. I can read a sentence and be like, I think that's pretentious, and someone else can be like, oh no, but I really took X, Y, and Z from it. Like, that's still subjective. We can't even all agree on the gravitas of one sentence. So anyways, that's the weird metadata analysis that happens like in a blink of an eye in my head after I finish or think about a book. And now we'll just go into my star ratings. I'll tell you what they generally mean, and that'll be this video. So 1 star. I really, really don't rate a lot of things 1 star. I know some people rate things 1 star just if they didn't like it. And I think that's fine. Everyone can do whatever they want with star ratings. They're star ratings. For me, I think it would have to actively be a bad thing and a harmful thing. Like, there has to be harm, misrepresentation, things like that. So I think there's 1 book I've read since being on BookTube that I would consider giving a 1 or a 1.5 star. And part of that is also it was a classic, and so I just know my rating won't do anything to hurt that book. Me saying this book's 1 star was not stopping anyone from reading. That book will be read until the end of time. It does not matter what I think. But in general, that's what 1 stars are. I don't actually even know what 1.5 would be, because I feel like if I was getting into 1.5 star range, I would just give it a 1 star, because it's really hard to get me below 3 stars as a reviewer, just because I think that, normally I would DNF, or I would just be so angry that it would be even lower. I don't know. So I don't have a 1.5 star usually. 2 star is typically bad. I typically think a book is bad for XYZ reason. It's not me being like, this is objectively a bad work, but I did not like it. It was not a good experience, and I think there were actual flaws that I want to bring up in a review. 2.5 star is something that has flaws, but it's more of a on me thing that it was bad. I understand what it was trying to do, but it still didn't work for me, sort of thing. So I think I wrote down not bad, but not for me. 3 stars is good. It's just good. It's fine. It's completely serviceable. Chances are, if I give something 3 stars, that means I worked too hard to read it. And what I mean by that is, I always had to get myself to pick up the book to read it, and then while I was reading, I had to figure out ways to make myself motivated to finish it. So it's not bad, but it wasn't engaging me. I wasn't consumably reading it. That's normally what happens. That's the big difference between a 3 and a 3.5 star is consumability, because 3.5 star is usually good and almost great. And the difference is that it's more consumable to me than a 3-star read, but it's just not quite up there. And 4 is great. It's a great book. Would probably recommend it to a bunch of people. I had a good time, but it probably just was missing a thing that made it, stopped it from being like a favorite of all time and stuff like that. 4.5 is almost favorite. Like, I was enjoying and consuming and loving my time with it, but it's just like not quite a favorite of all time. And don't ask me what makes something a favorite of all time. That's a special sauce. Don't know what it is. I don't know the recipe. I know it when I read it. and that's the 5 is favorite of all time or favorite of the year. Like, it's left an impression and will hopefully leave a lasting impression. And part of what made me go to half stars is I used to give a ton of stuff 5 stars, and I liked doing that. But then it was not helpful in terms of me finding my favorites. And then I would have some books that I'm like, well, it's not a 5-star, but it's not a 4-star either. So I mostly went to half stars because I needed a 4.5 and I needed a 3.5. I barely use 2.5, and like I said, I don't use 1.5. But 4.5 is like perfect for like, this was so much fun, but it might not last forever. It might not have the longevity. It might not be a favorite of all time, but man, am I so happy I picked it up, which is different from a 4, which is like, oh, that was really great. I really had fun. It's a different vibe, different emotion. And like I said, I needed something to separate me from the 3 and 3.5 and 4, because there just needed to be another category there, if that makes sense. So I don't know if this was interesting to you. However you rate books is great. Feel free to share that with me down below. And if you don't rate books, also fine. I know there's a whole contingent of people I follow on BookTube who don't like to rate books. I don't mind doing it, but I did go through a journey of being kind of stressed about my rating system, and then I just kind of let it happen. Because I remembered the rating system is partially for me. I've been rating books even before I knew there was a BookTube. I liked doing that so that I can go through my Goodreads and order things by rating, and it's enjoyable to me. As for when do I round up or round down on Goodreads, it's by feel. It's by whichever thing I think it's closer to. It's another subjective thing, but I always put my actual rating in my Goodreads description. When I'm caught up on Goodreads, I'm always perpetually behind. So that's it for this one. Leave star as an emoji if you just want me to know you're here and don't want to leave any other comments down below. And like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.